After the announcement of Spider-Man being an exclusive character for PlayStation owners of the game, several other exclusive perks for Sony were announced, and fans are not happy with the news. In addition, I'm going to be going through a handful of articles that talked about their early positive and negative experiences with the beta.
Stars and Stripes!
Hello and welcome to another carrotscraps video, and by another, I mean the 21st. As I mentioned a couple videos ago, Spider-Man was confirmed to be added in the upcoming Marvel's Avengers roster. However, it was made clear that his addition would only be for those paying for the game on PlayStation. Very quickly after this announcement, many voiced their frustration with the game. Some believe Sony is to blame for forcing exclusivity on developers, while others accuse the industry itself of going too far, and that this is just a way to scam potential players out of their money. Many people have even said that they plan on skipping the game as a result of this news. In a recent interview, co-head of Crystal Dynamics, Scott Amos, addressed the Spider-Man controversy. Essentially, he said that while they're excited to include a character like Spider-Man in their game, they are still bound by the ownership of the characters and IPs of Disney and Sony. To me, his statements are basically, it's out of our hands and we should be happy with what we got. He concludes his statements on the matter wondering why people focus on this one character, when in his words, "You're going to have hundreds of hours of content and years of storylines coming ahead of us, and new worlds and regions and new heroes, and more stuff we haven't even announced yet." So it sounds like Crystal Dynamics is sticking to their guns on Spider-Man and other exclusivity on PlayStation. He even rounds out these statements by saying he thinks fans can understand why this is a business decision, even though the rest of the game is made for everyone. So this was a very interesting interview to me, because I feel like it addresses the controversy head on. I'm not sure this will make people happy, and I feel like he could have gone about addressing certain issues in a more constructive way, but I do appreciate and am surprised by the honesty and commitment. As for my opinion, maybe I'm being cynical, but these companies are trying to make money. Providing a well-made and fun product should be their focus, but deals like this just make sense to me from a business perspective. Obviously, I want all players to be able to play as Spider-Man, but console wars have been a thing since the 90s. I don't see the decision to add Spider-Man exclusively to PlayStation any different than publishers funding exclusive games. Exclusive games like Spider-Man for the PlayStation 4. For anyone who's upset about Spider-Man being exclusive on PlayStation, I genuinely want to know what your opinion is in regards to the exclusivity of the Insomniac Spider-Man game. But ultimately, the news didn't surprise me at all. Since console-specific games haven't been as prevalent over the past 10 years, we've been seeing more and more incentive exclusivities. For example, maybe you can buy a game on all consoles, but a certain company paid the developers so it will be more attractive on their platform. In a lot of cases, there are even temporary exclusives. Exclusive perks for people buying a game on a certain console that won't factor in for people buying the game a year later. I ended up purchasing Arkham Knight on the PlayStation for whatever exclusive deal they offered, and all these years later I can't even remember the incentive that drew me to that console in the first place. I definitely can understand the frustration, and I am by no means saying that you can't be upset if this game isn't meeting your standards. I'm just saying the news didn't surprise me. Anyway, the inclusion of Spider-Man was not the only exclusive perk that upset fans this week. Shortly after the announcement and poor reception of Spider-Man, other exclusive content was announced for Sony consoles. Here's what PlayStation had to say about the additional exclusives. When it comes to cosmetics, PlayStation players will have a 30-day exclusive access to a legendary outfit, legendary emote, epic takedown, and nameplate for each superhero as they are released. This is also for the 6 launch heroes. In addition, we also have rewards for those with a PlayStation Plus subscription. For each superhero added to the game post-launch, Hawkeye included, all PS Plus members will receive a free bundle that contains a rare outfit, nameplate, and 100 credits to celebrate the addition of another Avenger to the roster. At launch, we'll have a free bundle for Ms. Marvel, available for PS Plus members to embiggen our love for Kamala. And that was the end of their statement. Side note, embiggen is Kamala's catchphrase. Her powers are to stretch, so instead of saying that she's stretching, she says that she embiggins. It's quirky, you get it. What immediately sticks out to me is that you won't just gain rewards for playing on PlayStation, but you'll also gain rewards for having their subscription service, which admittedly you would need to play the game online anyway. To me, it looks like news wasn't going to go over well with fans of the game either way, so they decided to drop the news while people were already upset in an attempt to avoid another outrage a month from now. The timed exclusives are definitely interesting to me and make me happy that not all exclusive content for PlayStation will remain that way. Like I said, if I had to guess, it's possible that eventually certain exclusives will be made available for other players. At any rate, whether you agree with this tactic or not, there is no denying it works. Even before these specific announcements, I decided to pre-order the game on PlayStation because of other minor exclusive perks. I didn't think exclusivity would go this far, but this kind of marketing worked on getting me to choose a specific console, even with minor incentives. And while we're on the subject, I did see some people upset about microtransactions being used to purchase in-game cosmetics. For those few people, I wanted to remind you that at the game's launch in E3 2019, it was proudly announced that there would be no loot boxes and no pay-to-win functions. However, shortly after that in an interview, they did confirm that there would be microtransactions for in-game cosmetics. Again, sadly, this just seems to be a tactic that modern game developers can't resist. Anyway, moving on from in-game transactions and player outrage, let's discuss some of the articles released talking about their early access playing the beta. It seems many news journalism sites were allowed to play the beta earlier than the general public, and many have posted articles talking about their experience. While I don't think these can strictly be called reviews, that is what I'll be calling them occasionally. Mark Medina wrote a review for IGN saying that the game felt like it was trying to please too many people, claiming that it didn't offer enough story for those looking for a single-player experience, and that it might not engage those looking for a looter-shooter grind. Other comments about the beta include that around the third mission, the once expressive and banter-prone heroes became bland avatars. Mark also says that the variety in mission gameplay doesn't last long and repetition seemed to be prevalent. However, he did seem to be optimistic about the future of the game, adding more diversity in mission structure. On the subject of multiplayer, it's mentioned that other than using a headset, there's no way to communicate with other players. I personally don't own a headset for my PS4, so this news is a letdown for me. Mark's largest con mentioned in the review is a critique of its gear system. From all of his time playing, he claimed to have not found anything interesting or particularly rewarding. He also critiques the fact that all gear is invisible and can't be seen on the character. From his description, it also seems like there's more optimal loot than others, leading to shallow customization. Apparently there's also a button that automatically equips the best possible loot to your character. While his review was at best skeptical of the game, he ends the review on an optimistic note, explaining that he did enjoy his time, especially with the story and characters. He continues to describe how he was surprised by how different the characters played. His last comment is about how many live service games in recent years are better post-launch than they are at launch, and he fears this might be the case with Marvel's Avengers. Moving on to Ryan Gilliam's Polygon review, it seems to be much more positive than Mark's article on the game. The article claims that Marvel's Avengers is a successful multiplayer RPG, masquerading as a superhero game, and these comments seem to imply that there's a lack of other quality entries in this genre. His main point about the beta's quality interestingly focuses on the gear grind, celebrating this practice in stark contrast again to the previous review. While the title and wording of the Polygon article seems to imply that the writer was very pleased with the game, they didn't give very detailed reasons why beyond just enjoying the gear grind and the prospect of a quality online multiplayer RPG. Minor criticisms about the game are a mention that Hulk's movement during platforming sections aren't ideal. Interestingly, he ends the review by cautioning expectations, citing the troubled launch of Anthem, another live service RPG. Next, let's look at an article by CNET. Sean Keane had a very interesting article that seemed to imply he didn't have as much time with the game, but did provide an enlightening interview with Amos. Sean's criticisms with the game start with Hulk. He says that he didn't have as much fun playing as Hulk, as the famously powerful Jade Giant didn't feel as satisfying because you had to grind to make him feel more powerful. He mentions this more as dissonance than a legitimate criticism though. Sean goes on to explain that his interview with Amos provides a story reason for why the Hulk might be weak at the start of the game. When asked about the gear not being visible in game, Amos says they didn't want to compromise the visual integrity of the characters too far from the source material. On a side note, a lot of the writers of these articles seem very taken by Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, with some mentioning her personality and even her gameplay as the highlight of the beta. In Amos's interview with CNET, he explains that Kamala has many attacks that are meant to mirror other Avengers, because of how influenced her character is by these heroes. This tells me that the developers were also quite taken by Kamala to put such work into the character. As a comic book reader, I've been exposed to Kamala Khan for many years now, but for a large majority of people, this is their first exposure to the character, and she seems to be a big highlight to them, which I think is pretty cool. The article goes on to explain that online multiplayer will be immediately available when starting the game, which is nice to hear. The writer, Sean, talks about his feelings on missions he played and mission types, ultimately saying that they felt repetitive after a while. This is a sentiment others who have played the beta already have expressed. However, in the interview, it's later said that there will be more variety in the full game. Quote, "This is just a small slice to give you a feel for each different facet of the game. So the variety and stories within it are going to continue to expand. This is just us trying to create a living organism. That world where we could tell new stories and new heroes, add new villains, and there is a plan to do that very shortly. The variety of content that we're planning will remove some of the repetitious feel." Sean closes his article by saying, as a fan of Marvel Comics, he is really excited about the game's potential, and the addition of characters like Spider-Man in the game. On that subject, he confirms that the Spider-Man coming to the Avengers game will not be the 2018 Insomniac version of the character. Quote, "He's our Spider-Man. Whenever we add characters to our world, we have to ground these characters in our story. Every hero will have their story and arc, as well as a villain that accompanies them." The last piece of information that's new to me from this article is the reveal that the Xbox and PC beta will end on August 16th after starting on August 14th. In addition, the open beta will end August 23rd after starting on August 21st. The last article I want to talk about is the Arc Technica review by Sam Makovec. The article starts by saying they have been careful with their coverage of the game because they thought its quality looked suspect from the E3 2019 announcement. Their time with the beta doesn't seem to have helped their opinions on the game, saying that their suspicions have been confirmed. However, on the subject of the game's performance on the PS4 Pro, Sam writes very positive feedback on the game. Later in the article, the gameplay of certain characters is criticized and called sluggish, pointing at Black Widow as the best character in terms of responsiveness, but still not perfect. Hulk is specifically criticized for his attack animations. Next, Sam gets into a discussion about loot, saying that if Crystal Dynamics wants players to get invested in the loot grind, they need to provide more depth to the customization system. Lastly, before ending the article, the variety of enemies is also briefly criticized. While Sam is potentially the toughest on the game, I appreciate that he ends the article by encouraging players to make their own opinions on the game and wonders if these things can be fixed eventually. And I actually encourage the same of anybody watching this video. I'll provide links for all of these articles in the description, and by all means check out these articles and make your own opinion of what these people have to say about the beta. Obviously I didn't cover the entirety of all of these articles, and I picked out what was most important to me, while still trying to be as fair as possible covering negative and positive comments. Before we finish this video, I wanted to talk about gameplay and mechanics that were covered in these articles that we potentially didn't know about or that stuck out to me. In the Polygon article, the writer mentions that they spent most of their time playing as Iron Man once they had the freedom to choose their character. Shortly after, they say that the majority of the gear that they would find was for Iron Man specifically, and that by the end of the beta, his Iron Man was extremely powerful. Firstly, this seems to confirm that the majority of the loot you will receive will be for the character you're playing as. Secondly, the fact that he mentions that his Iron Man was extremely powerful after 10 hours of gameplay makes me wonder about difficulty in the game and how it relates to in-game rewards and progress. I'm assuming and hoping this is an exaggeration, or if it's not, that later missions in the full game will meet your character's strength for an engaging challenge. This does bring up another question I have. In the IGN article, the writer mentions that if you want to swap between characters, you need to be careful because a character you casually play as won't be at the same level as your main character, so you might have to grind XP as to not die. In the multiplayer War Table streams, the developers have mentioned that when you use AI companions, they are your AI. If that's the case, does that mean to have a good AI team in Avengers, you need to grind each character on your team? If you only play as one character the whole game and start a mission with a character AI that you've never played as, will they be level 1? Or will they temporarily scale to your current level, with cosmetics and gear being the only thing differentiating them as your characters? Anyway, moving on, later in the Polygon article it's explained that gear is color-coded, and the article finishes by saying that the beta's final mission is 45 minutes long and will feature a fight with a giant tank boss at the end. So the beta is right around the corner for PlayStation players and not far away for PC and Xbox players either. It's really great to get such different opinions from people who have already played the beta. It seems that gear, loot, and repetition in missions is the greatest source of conflict for those who have played the beta early, but I do find it interesting that while some were conflicted by these parts of the game, others called it the greatest strength in the beta. I do wish I heard more from the Polygon writers' positive feelings on the game though. While reading all these articles, I noticed there wasn't many big new details about the game. Could they be concealing bigger parts of the beta, or do we know everything there is already going in? Either way, I can't wait to start playing the game. And that's going to do it for this video. If for whatever reason you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like or to subscribe for more. If you want to watch me play video games live, check me out on Twitch at carrotscraps. To see my comprehensive guide on what Pokemon can and cannot be caught, check me out on TikTok, also at carrotscraps. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at carrotscraps as well. Thanks again so much for watching, and I will see you soon. I have no idea how to pronounce anyone's names. I was trying my best. Isn't that worth something?